When I discovered my fiancée, Sophia Li, was cheating with my best friend, Carl Ferrari, I could have exposed them immediately. Instead, I did something far more devastating. I stepped aside and let them have their perfect wedding. I even paid for their dream honeymoon to the Maldives, complete with the luxury resort package they'd always talked about. What they didn't know was that I had spent 6 months carefully orchestrating their social and financial destruction by the time they returned from their romantic getaway. Their reputations were in ruins, their careers destroyed, and their families had disowned them. The evidence I'd been gathering wasn't just about their affair, was about the illegal business dealings they'd been hiding, the lies they'd told everyone, and the people they'd betrayed to get ahead. I gave them the honeymoon of their dreams, and then I gave them the nightmare they deserved. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rowan Miller, and 3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was the co-owner of Pinnacle Digital Marketing in downtown Seattle, engaged to the most beautiful woman in the city, and my best friend since college was my business partner. Life was perfect, so I believed until that rainy Thursday evening, when I decided to surprise Sophia with dinner from her favorite Italian place. I used my key to enter her apartment in the Belltown district, balancing takeout containers and a bottle of wine. The lights were dimmed, and I could hear soft music playing from her bedroom. My heart warmed, thinking she was setting a romantic mood for us. How naive I was. "Sophia, babe, I brought Giuseppe's," called out, setting the food on her granite kitchen counter. No response. The music continued, something sultry and intimate that made me smile. I loosened my tie and headed toward the bedroom, planning to sweep her into my arms. What I found instead shattered my world into a million pieces. Through the crack in the door, I saw them. Sophia, my fiancée of 2 years, the woman who wore my grandmother's engagement ring, was wrapped around Carl Ferrari, my best friend, my business partner, the guy who'd been my best man at every major life event. They were so lost in each other they didn't hear me approach. I stood frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Carl's hands tangled in Sophia's dark hair, the same hair I'd stroked just that morning as she slept beside me. Her legs were wrapped around his waist, and she was making sounds I thought were reserved only for me. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to burst in, to confront them, to demand explanations. But something deeper held me back. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was strategic thinking. Or maybe it was the part of me that already suspected something was wrong. For weeks, Sophia had been distant, working late, taking mysterious phone calls, being evasive about her schedule. Carl, too, had been acting strange, avoiding eye contact during our business meetings, making excuses to skip our usual Friday night drinks, being overly friendly. Whenever Sophia was around, I backed away silently, my hands shaking as I gathered the takeout containers. My mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. How long had this been going on? Was I the only one who didn't know? Did our employees know? Our friends? My family? Instead of confronting them, I left. I drove aimlessly through Seattle's rain-soaked streets for hours, ending up at Cary Park overlooking the city skyline. The Space Needle looked blurry through my tear stares of rage, betrayal, and something else I couldn't quite identify yet. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about catching them in the act. This was about power, control, and the fact that they thought they could fool me indefinitely. Sophia was still planning our wedding, still acting like the loving fiancé. Carl was still my business partner, still pretending to be my loyal friend. They were playing a game, and they thought I was too stupid to realize it. But I wasn't stupid. I was a digital marketing expert who specialized in reputation management and crisis control. I understood how to build people up, and more importantly, how to tear them down. I knew every dirty secret in their lives because they'd trusted me with them. Sophia's family didn't know. She'd been fired from her previous job for embezzling client funds. Carl's investors didn't know he'd been cooking the books on his side ventures. Neither of them knew that I'd been quietly documenting their suspicious behavior for weeks. initially out of concern for our business, now for entirely different reasons. As I sat in my car watching the city lights, a plan began to form. It was elegant, comprehensive, and absolutely ruthless. I wouldn't just expose their affair, would systematically destroy everything they'd built on lies and deception. The wedding was in 3 months. Sophia had been planning it obsessively, spending my money on venue deposits, catering, flowers, and her dream dress. She'd booked the Grand Hyatt Seattle for the reception and had been talking non-stop about the honeymoon she wanted, 2 weeks in the Maldives at the Conrad Resort, complete with an overwater villa and private butler service. If I let her have it all? What if I played the devoted fiancée up until the moment I pulled the rug out from under them? But not at the wedding. That would be too obvious, too immediate. They'd recover, make excuses, paint me as the bitter ex-fiancé. No, I would. Let them get married. I would let them go on their dream honeymoon. And while they were sipping champagne in paradise, I would be back home systematically destroying their lives with surgical precision by the time I drove home that night. I had made my decision. I would become the best actor they'd ever seen. I would smile, plan the wedding, toast their happiness, and send them off on their honeymoon with my blessing. And then I would show them what real betrayal looked like. The next morning, Sophia called me as I was getting ready for work. "Rowan, sweetie, did you come by last night? I thought I heard someone in the kitchen." "No, babe," I said, my voice steady and loving. "I worked late and went straight home." "Why?" "Oh, nothing. I must have been dreaming. I love you." "I love you too," I replied, and for the first time in our relationship, the words felt like poison in my mouth. The hardest part wasn't pretending to love Sophia, was pretending to trust Carl. Every morning, I walked into our Pinnacle Digital marketing office in the Columbia Center and shook hands with the man who was sleeping with my fiancée. Every day we discussed client strategies, reviewed financial reports, made decisions about our company's future, while he stabbed me in the back, but I was determined to be perfect. I became the most attentive fiancée Sophia had ever dreamed of. I surprised her with flowers, took her to expensive dinners at Canlis and the Herb Farm, and enthusiastically discussed wedding plans that made my stomach turn. "So wonderful," she said one evening, as we tasted cakes at a boutique bakery in Capitol Hill. "I feel like you're more excited about this wedding than I am." If only she knew how excited I was, just not for the reasons she thought. I had started my research immediately. 3 weeks after discovering their affair, I'd already uncovered enough information to destroy them both, but I was just getting started. The beauty of running a digital marketing company was having access to advanced investigative tools and databases that most people didn't even know existed. Sophia's embezzlement from her previous job was worse than I'd initially thought. She hadn't just stolen money, she'd been running elaborate schemes to redirect client payments into personal accounts. Her former employer, Morrison & Associates, had quietly settled to avoid scandal. But I had copies of all the internal documents proving her guilt. Carl's financial crimes were even more extensive. He'd been using our company's reputation to secure investments for side projects that existed only on paper. He'd taken nearly $200,000 from 3 different investors, promising them revolutionary app development that he'd never intended to deliver. But the deeper I dug, the more personal details I uncovered. Sophia had been having affairs throughout. Our entire relationship, Carl wasn't even her first betrayal, just her most convenient one. Carl had been stealing from our company for over a year, skimming money from client accounts and falsifying expense reports. They deserved each other, and they deserved what was coming. The most challenging part was maintaining my relationship with Carl. We'd been friends since our sophomore year at University of Washington, where we'd bonded over late-night coding sessions and dreams of starting our own company. He'd been there when my father died, when I struggled with depression, when I took the biggest risks of my entrepreneurial career. "You know, Rowan," he said one afternoon, as we reviewed quarterly projections, "I'm really happy. For you and Sophia, you two are perfect together." I looked up from my laptop, forcing a smile. "Thanks, man. That means a lot coming from you." He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I just want you to know that I'll always have your back, no matter what. Brothers, you know." The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it, Absolutely. Brothers forever. That evening, I added another item to my growing dossier. Carl had looked me in the eye and lied about having my back, while literally having my fiancée. Behind my back, the psychological profile I was building on both of them would have impressed a criminal prosecutor. Sophia, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly demanding about the wedding. She wanted everything to be perfect, and she wanted me to pay for all of it. The venue alone cost $15,000, the catering another $20,000, and her dress was a custom creation. That set me back $8,000. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Baby, I found the most amazing honeymoon package," she announced one evening, showing me her laptop screen. "The Conrad Maldives has this incredible overwater villa suite. It's only $2,000 a night. Only." I raised an eyebrow, though. I was already mentally calculating the cost. For 2 weeks, it would be about $30,000 total, including flights and activities. "But Rowan, it's our honeymoon. Supposed to be once in a lifetime." She was right about. That would definitely be once in a lifetime. "Book it," I said, kissing her forehead. "You deserve the best." Her eyes lit up with genuine happiness, and for a moment, I almost felt guilty about what I was planning. Almost, the guilt disappeared completely when I installed monitoring software on her phone during one of her suspiciously long showers. Within hours, I had access to every text message, phone call, and social media interaction she'd had in the past 6 months. The messages between her and Carl were nauseating. They called me clueless and pathetic. They made jokes about how easy it was to manipulate me. They discussed their post-wedding plans, which apparently involved Carl buying out my share of the company and Sophia filing for divorce after exactly 2 years to maximize her alimony settlement. They had been planning to destroy me all along. But the most damaging discovery was their communication with others. They'd been recruiting other employees from our company, promising them better positions in Carl's new venture. They'd been bad-mouthing me to clients, subtly undermining my reputation while building their own. I documented everything. Screenshots, recordings, financial records, witness statements from people they'd defrauded. I built 2 comprehensive files that would not only expose their personal betrayal, but completely destroy their professional reputations. The final piece of my plan involved their families and social circles. I began strategically reaching out to their relatives, mutual friends, and professional contacts. Not to expose them yet, but to plant seeds of doubt and gather additional information. Sophia's mother, Eleanor, had always liked me better than her daughter's previous boyfriends. During a casual lunch in Kirkland, she mentioned her concerns about Sophia's recent behavior. "She's been so secretive lately," Eleanor confided, "and she's been spending money like crazy. I just hope she's not getting into trouble again." Again, that was interesting. Carl's father, a respected judge in Tacoma, is even more revealing during a golf game at Newcastle Golf Club. "Carl's been asking me about legal protection for business partners," he mentioned casually. "Something about protecting assets in case of disputes." I told him that kind of thinking usually means someone's planning something unethical. The judge had no idea how right he was. By the end of the 2nd month, I had everything I needed to destroy them completely. But I wasn't finished gathering evidence. I wanted my revenge to be so thorough, so devastating, that they would never recover from it. The wedding was now 6 weeks away, and they had no idea what was coming. 5 weeks before the wedding, everything started accelerating. Sophia quit her job at Meridian Financial Consulting, claiming she wanted to focus on being a supportive wife and helping me grow our business. What she actually wanted was unlimited access to our company resources while she and Carl planned their takeover. Carl, meanwhile, had become increasingly bold in his deceptions. He started scheduling client meetings that coincided perfectly with Sophia's suddenly busy schedule. They weren't even trying to hide their affair anymore. They were just better at timing their rendezvous when they thought I'd be occupied. But I was always watching. I had installed discrete cameras in my own home, hidden tracking devices in both their cars, and gained access to their email accounts. I knew where they went, what they discussed, and how they planned to execute their betrayal. The most revealing conversation happened at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, where they met for what they called a strategy session. Thanks to the listening device I'd planted in Carl's briefcase, I heard every word. "The timing has to be perfect," Carl said. "We need Rowan completely off guard. If he suspects anything before the wedding, he might change the company structure. Or move assets." "He won't suspect anything," Sophia replied confidently. "He's too in love with me to think clearly." "Did you see how excited he got about the honeymoon? He practically threw money at me." "That's going to be the best part," Carl laughed. "While you're posting Instagram photos from paradise, I'll be filing the paperwork to buy out his shares. By the time you get back, I'll own 60% of Pinnacle Digital. And I'll file for legal separation the following week," Sophia added. "My lawyer says I can claim emotional distress and demand half of everything he owns personally, plus alimony." They had thought of everything except the possibility that I might be 3 steps ahead of them. That evening, made the final preparations for my counterattack. I contacted investigative journalist Isabella Wong at the Seattle Times, who specialized in corporate fraud cases. I didn't give her the full story yet, but I provided enough information to get her interested in investigating suspicious activity. At several local investment schemes, I also reached out to Detective Nora Lewis at the Seattle Police Department's Economic Crimes Unit. Again, I was careful not to reveal too much, but I provided anonymous tips about potential embezzlement and investment fraud that warranted investigation. The beauty of my plan was that I didn't need to actively destroy them, I just needed to provide evidence to the right people and let the legal system do the work. 3 weeks before the wedding, the first crack appeared in their facade. Sophia received a call from her former employer, Morrison & Associates. Apparently, the IRS was conducting an audit and had questions about discrepancies in client accounts during her tenure. "It's probably nothing," she told me that evening. But I could see the panic in her eyes. "It's just routine questions about old files." "I'm sure it's fine, sweetheart," I said, rubbing her shoulders reassuringly. "You always kept meticulous records." If only she knew that I'd been the one who anonymously tipped off the IRS about her embezzlement. Carl faced his own challenges when one of his investors, Louis Romano, started asking detailed questions about the app development project he'd supposedly been funding. Louis was a successful restaurateur who owned several establishments in Pioneer Square, and he wasn't the type to be easily fooled by vague progress reports. "Louis becoming a real pain," Carl complained during one of our morning meetings. "He wants to see actual code, beta versions, market research. It's like he doesn't trust me." "Maybe you should show him what you've got so far," I suggested innocently. "Transparency is always the best policy with investors." Carl's uncomfortable silence told me everything I needed to know. There was nothing to show because nothing had ever been developed. 2 weeks before the wedding, the pressure began to mount. Sophia was spending most of her days dealing with lawyers and accountants related to the Morrison & Associates situation. Carl was frantically trying to produce something tangible for his increasingly suspicious investors. They were both stressed, paranoid, starting to turn on each other. I overheard their argument during one of their secret meetings at a coffee shop in Fremont. They thought they were being discreet, but I was sitting 2 tables away with a newspaper and a directional microphone disguised as a smartphone accessory. "This is your fault," Sophia hissed. "If you hadn't been so greedy with those investors, we wouldn't be dealing with this scrutiny." "My fault?" Carl shot back. "You're the one with federal investigators breathing down your neck. Maybe if you hadn't been so sloppy with your embezzlement." "Keep your voice down," she snapped, looking around nervously. "Damn, and it wasn't embezzlement. It was... creative accounting. Tell that to the IRS." I smiled behind my newspaper. They were cracking under pressure, exactly as I'd hoped. The final week before the wedding brought the chaos I'd been orchestrating to a crescendo. Isabella Wong published her first article about suspicious investment schemes targeting Seattle entrepreneurs. While she didn't name Carl specifically, anyone in our industry would recognize the details. Detective. Lewis called me personally to ask if I'd noticed any unusual financial activity at Pinnacle Digital. I played the concerned business partner perfectly, expressing shock and offering to cooperate fully with any investigation. "We take these matters very seriously, Mr. Miller," she assured me. "If there's been any fraudulent activity involving your company, We'll get to the bottom of it. Meanwhile, the IRS audit of Morrison and Associates had expanded to include a full investigation of Sophia's financial records. She was now facing potential criminal charges that could result in federal prison time. Both Sophia and Carl were barely holding themselves together, but they were committed to going through with the wedding, while they still believed their plan would work. That once they were married and had legal access to my assets, they could weather any storms. They had no idea that the storm was just beginning. 3 days before the wedding, I made my final move. I scheduled a meeting with our company's board of directors and legal counsel, presented them with comprehensive evidence of Carl's fraud and embezzlement, along with documentation showing how he'd been using company resources for personal gain. "This is devastating," said our corporate attorney, William Chen. "If even half of this is true, we need to take immediate action to protect the company." "I'm afraid it's all true," I said sadly. "I've been hoping I was wrong, but the evidence is overwhelming." By the end of that meeting, Carl Ferrari was no longer a partner in Pinnacle Digital Marketing. He was a defendant in multiple civil and criminal cases, and his assets were frozen pending investigation. But I didn't tell him yet. I wanted him to find out at the worst possible moment. The wedding was now 72 hours away, and everything was falling into place perfectly. Sophia was about to marry a man whose life was about to implode. She had no idea her own destruction was equally imminent. I could hardly wait to give them the honeymoon they truly deserved. The morning of my wedding to Sophia Li dawned gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that seemed to mirror the darkness of what was about to unfold. As I adjusted my bow tie in the mirror of my suite at the Grand Hyatt, I felt a strange sense of calm. After months of careful planning, today was the day everything would begin to unravel for the two people who had betrayed me most deeply. My phone buzzed with a text from Carl. "Big day, brother. Can't wait to celebrate with you tonight. You're getting the girl of your dreams." If only he knew that by tonight, his own dreams would be turning into nightmares. The ceremony was scheduled. 4 p.m. in the hotel's elegant ballroom. I had spared no expense: crystal chandeliers, white roses flown in from Ecuador, string quartet, and enough champagne to float a yacht. Sophia had wanted perfection, and I was giving it to her. After all, it would be the last perfect moment of her life. I arrived at the venue early, ostensibly to handle last-minute details, but really to ensure that all my contingency plans were in place. I had arranged for several key people to be present who would play crucial roles in the coming days. Detective Lewis was there, disguised as a guest, keeping a watchful eye on Carl. She had agreed to my request to wait until after the ceremony. Before making any arrests, I wanted Carl to experience the full weight of his betrayal before facing justice. Isabella Wong from the Seattle Times was also present, posing as a society photographer. She had promised me exclusive access to cover the story when it broke, in exchange for front row seats to what she suspected would be the scandal of the year. Louis Romano, Carl's defrauded investor, was seated prominently in the second row. He still didn't know the full extent of Carl's deception, but that would change very soon. At 3:30 p.m., I took my position at the altar, Carl beside me as my best man. He looked nervous, which I initially attributed to pre-wedding jitters. Realized until later that he had received some disturbing phone calls that morning calls I had orchestrated. "You clean up nice," Carl said, straightening his own tie. "Sophia's going to be blown away." "I hope so," I replied with a smile. "Today needs to be unforgettable." The music began, and the bridesmaids started their procession. Sophia's sister Daisy looked beautiful in her lavender gown, followed by her college roommate Audrey Stone and her cousin Maeve Evans. They all smiled at me warmly, having no idea what their beloved Sophia had been doing behind my back. Then the bridal march began, and Sophia appeared at the back of the aisle. I have to admit, she looked stunning. Her dress was a custom creation from a high-end designer in New York silk, lace and crystals that caught the light as she moved. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and she wore the diamond earrings I had given her for our first anniversary. As she walked toward me on her father's arm, I saw tears in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt guilty about what I was planning. She looked so innocent, so genuinely happy, that I questioned whether I was going too far. Then I remembered the recording. I'd of her laughing with Carl about how pathetic and clueless I was, and my resolve hardened. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. We exchanged vows that Sophia had written herself beautiful words about love, trust, and lifelong commitment that she had no intention of honoring. When she promised to forsake all others, I saw Carl shift uncomfortably beside me. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Sophia kissed me with what seemed like genuine passion. The crowd erupted in applause, and I noticed several people wiping away tears. If only they knew they were witnessing the beginning of the most elaborate revenge plot in Seattle's social history. The reception was a masterpiece of elegance and celebration. The food was exquisite, the wine flowed freely, and the band played all of Sophia's favorite songs. I danced with my new wife, posed for countless photographs, and accepted congratulations from friends and family who believed they were witnessing a fairy tale romance. During the traditional best man speech, Carl stood up with his champagne. Glasson delivered what would go down as one of the most ironic toasts in wedding history. "I've known Rowan Miller for over a decade," he began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "He's the most loyal, trustworthy, and generous person I've ever met. When I started my business, Rowan was there. When I needed a friend, Rowan was there. And Sophia, you're getting a man who will never betray you, never lie to you, and never give you any reason to doubt his devotion." The applause was thunderous. Several people actually stood up. Sophia beamed at me with what looked like genuine love. I raised my own glass and responded, "Carl, you're absolutely right about loyalty and trust. They're the foundation of every important relationship, business partnerships, friendships, and marriages. Without them, everything falls apart." I looked directly at him. "I've learned so much from you about what true loyalty looks like." Clinked his glass against mine, completely missing the double meaning in my words. At 9 p.m., as planned, I pulled Carl aside for a private conversation in one of the hotel's small conference rooms. It was time for the first phase of his reckoning. "Carl, I need to talk to you about something serious," I said, closing the door behind us. "Sure, what's up?" He was still in celebration mode, slightly drunk from champagne and high on the success of his secret plan. I handed him a manila envelope. "I've been investigating some financial irregularities at Pinnacle Digital. I think someone has been embezzling from the company." His face went pale. "What kind of irregularities? Take a look." He opened the envelope and found photocopies of bank statements, falsified expense reports, and forged invoices, all with his name on them. I watched as the blood drained from his face and his hands began to shake. "Rowan, I can explain." "You," I interrupted. "Can you explain how $200,000 disappeared from client accounts? Can you explain why you've been invoicing for services that were never provided? Can you explain why 3 different investors have been asking me about projects that don't exist?" Carl sank into a chair, the envelope falling from his trembling hands. "Long have you known?" "Months," I said simply. "The board voted you out 3 days ago. Your assets have been frozen, and Detective Lewis is waiting outside to place you under arrest." The color completely left his face. "Detective Lewis. She's here as my guest, but she's also here on official business." "Carl, you're going to prison. You've defrauded investors, embezzled from our company, and committed multiple felonies." He looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Rowan, please. We've been friends for 10 years. Surely we can work something out, friends?" I laughed coldly. "Friends don't steal from each other, Carl. Friends don't lie to each other. Friends definitely don't sleep with each other's fiancées." The last sentence hit him like a physical blow. His mouth fell open, and for several seconds he couldn't speak. He finally whispered. "I know everything," I replied. "I know about the affair. I know about your plan to buy out my shares while I was on my honeymoon. I know about Sophia's plan to file for divorce and take half my assets. I know about all of it." Carl buried his face in his hands. "How long?" "I've known about the affair for 3 months. I've known about your financial crimes for even longer. See, Carl, while you thought you were playing me, I was playing you, and I'm much better at this game than you are." I stood up and straightened my tuxedo jacket. Detective Lewis will be here in 5 minutes to arrest you. The story will break in tomorrow's Seattle Times. By Monday, every business publication in the country will know what you've done. You'll never work in tech again. You'll never be trusted with anyone's money again. And you'll spend the next several years in federal prison. I paused at the door. Oh, and Carl, thank you for the toast about loyalty and trust. It was perfect. I left him there, broken and defeated, and returned to the reception where my new wife was mingling with guests, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. At 10:30 p.m., Detective Lewis quietly escorted Carl Ferrari out of my wedding reception in handcuffs. Most guests didn't notice I had arranged for the arrest to happen during the bouquet toss, when everyone's attention was focused on the single women competing for Sophia's flowers. The irony wasn't lost on me, while other women were fighting for the chance at marriage. The woman who had just gotten married was about to lose everything. Phase 1 of my revenge was complete. Carl Ferrari, my former best friend and business partner, was now facing multiple felony charges and complete financial ruin. But the real show was just beginning. In 12 hours, Sophia and I would be on a plane to the Maldives for our dream honeymoon. She thought she was embarking on 2 weeks of luxury and romance. Instead, she was walking into the perfect trap. The first 3 days of our honeymoon at the Conrad Maldives were almost perfect. If you ignored the fact that I was married to a woman I now despised and was systematically destroying her life from paradise, our overwater villa was everything Sophia had dreamed of: crystal-clear turquoise waters stretching to the horizon, a private deck with direct ocean access and luxury, amenities that cost more per night than most people earned in a month. Sophia spent hours on Instagram, posting carefully curated photos of her perfect honeymoon while having no idea that her perfect life was disintegrating back in Seattle. "Rowan, isn't this amazing?" she said on our second morning, posing in a white bikini against the villa's infinity pool. "I feel like we're the only 2 people in the world." "It's incredible," I agreed, though I was more focused on the encrypted messages I was receiving on my secondary phone, the one Sophia didn't know about. The first message was from Detective Lewis: Carl Ferrari officially charged with embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. 3 additional investors have come forward. He's looking at 8 to 12 years federal prison. The second was from Isabella Wong. Story goes live tomorrow morning. Seattle Times front page. "Have you told your wife yet?" I typed back, "Not yet." Her enjoy paradise a little longer. What Sophia didn't know was that every romantic photo she posted, every caption about marrying her soulmate, was being screenshot and saved by dozens of people who would soon know the truth about her character. The internet is forever, and her social media presence was about to become evidence of her deception. On our 4th day, while Sophia was getting a couple's massage at the resort spa, I received the call I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Miller, this is Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We need to discuss your wife's involvement in the Morrison and Associates embezzlement case." I stepped out onto our villa's deck, watching the sunset paint the Indian Ocean in shades of gold and crimson. "What can I tell you, Agent Chen?" "We have evidence that suggests Mrs. Miller, formerly Ms. LeMay, have been running a more extensive operation than initially suspected. We believe she was involved in identity theft, credit card fraud, and money laundering spanning multiple states." This was news to me. My investigation had focused on her embezzlement from Morrison and Associates, but the FBI had apparently uncovered a much larger criminal enterprise. "We're issuing a warrant for her arrest," Agent Chen continued. "Given that she's currently out of the country, we'll need to coordinate with international authorities." "Where exactly are you located?" "The Maldives," I said. "The Conrad Resort. We'll be in touch with resort security and local authorities. Mrs. Miller will be detained upon your return to U.S. soil." After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. Even I hadn't realized the full extent of Sophia's criminal activities. She wasn't just a cheating embezzler. She was apparently a career criminal who had been using our relationship as cover for much more serious crimes. When Sophia returned from her massage, glowing and relaxed, I studied her face with new eyes. How had I lived with this woman for 2 years without realizing what she truly was? "You look serious," she said, settling beside me on the deck lounger. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about how much things are going to change when we get home," I replied truthfully. She smiled and curled up against my chest. "Good changes, I hope. I'm so happy, Rowan. This has been the perfect wedding, the perfect honeymoon. I feel like we can conquer the world together." If only she knew that her world was about to conquer her. The next morning brought the first crack in her blissful ignorance. She was checking her phone over breakfast when her face suddenly went pale. "Rowan," she said, her voice shaky. "Have you seen the news from Seattle?" I looked up from my Eggs Benedict with feigned concern. "No. What's wrong?" She showed me her phone screen. The Seattle Times headline read, "Local tech entrepreneur arrested for multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." Below it was a photo of Carl being led away in handcuffs. "Carl's been arrested," she whispered. "They're saying he stole money from your company, defrauded investors." "Rowan, did you know about this?" I took her hand gently. I had suspicions, but I hoped I was wrong. I confronted him at our wedding reception, and he admitted everything. The police were waiting. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Whether from genuine shock or fear for herself, I couldn't tell. "But he was your best friend. How could he do this?" "To you, people aren't always who we think they are," I said meaningfully. "Sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the worst betrayals." She nodded, completely missing the irony in my words. Over the next few hours, Sophia became increasingly agitated as more details emerged online. Carl's arrest was just the beginning. Isabella Wong's investigative reporting had uncovered a web of corruption that implicated several other people in Seattle's tech community. "They're saying Carl had accomplices," Sophia said, reading from her phone. "The FBI is investigating other people who might have been involved in his schemes." "Really?" I asked innocently. "Anyone we know?" "They're not releasing names yet, but—" She trailed off, reading something that made her face go even paler. I didn't need to look at her phone to know what she was reading. Isabella's follow-up article had just gone live, detailing the connection between Carl's fraud and embezzlement cases at several Seattle financial firms, including Morrison and Associates. Sophia excused herself to make a phone call, claiming she needed to check on a family matter. Through the villa's thin walls, I could hear her frantic conversation with someone, probably her lawyer. "What do you mean they issued a warrant?" she hissed into the phone. "I'm on my honeymoon." This was supposed to be taken care of. There was a long pause as she listened to the response. "No, he doesn't know anything. I've been playing the perfect wife." "What? How is that possible?" Another pause, this one longer. "Fine, I'll handle it. But if this goes sideways, you're going down with me." When she returned to our breakfast table, she was visibly shaken but trying to maintain her composure. "Everything all right with your family?" I asked. "Just some drama with my sister," she lied smoothly. "Nothing that can't wait until we get home." But I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was calculating, planning, trying to figure out how to minimize the damage to herself. That afternoon, while Sophia was supposedly napping, I heard her making another series of calls. This time, I used the listening device I'd planted in her phone case to record everything. The conversations revealed the true extent of her desperation. She was trying to transfer money to offshore accounts, contacting criminal associates about fake identities, and even discussing the possibility of claiming asylum in a country without extradition treaties. But the most damning conversation was with someone she called Vincent, apparently a criminal contact who specialized in making people disappear. "I need to disappear for a while," she said. "My husband doesn't suspect anything yet, but it's only a matter of time. Can you arrange something from this location?" Vincent's response was inaudible, but Sophia's reply was crystal clear. "I don't care what happens to him. He's been useful, but he's not part of my long-term plans anyway." Those words hit me harder than I'd expected, even knowing what she was capable of. Hearing her discuss my potential murder so casually was chilling. I realized then that my revenge had been almost too successful. I'd backed Sophia into a corner where she was now planning to kill me to escape justice, as the sun set on our 5th day in paradise. I watched my wife of less than a week stand on our villa's deck, staring out at the ocean with the intensity of a predator planning her next move. She had no idea that I was recording her every conversation, tracking her every financial transaction, and coordinating her capture with multiple law enforcement agencies. Tomorrow our flight would take us back to Seattle, where Agent Chen and her team would be waiting. Sophia thought she was planning my demise, but she was actually planning her own. The honeymoon was almost over, and soon she would learn what it really meant to have nowhere left to run. 6 months later, sat in the boardroom of what was now Miller Digital Solutions, formerly Pinnacle Digital, marketing, reviewing quarterly reports that showed our company had not only survived the scandal, but thrived because of it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Carl's arrest and the subsequent media coverage had actually generated massive publicity for our firm. Clients appreciated our transparency and our cooperation with law enforcement. Our reputation as an ethical company had attracted new business from organizations that valued integrity over profit. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Miller, your 2 p.m. is here." Isabella Wong entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the satisfied expression of a journalist who had just won a Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting. "Rowan," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I wanted to thank you again. The series about the Seattle tech fraud ring has been picked up nationally. 3 other cities have launched similar investigations based on our reporting." "Any word on the final sentencing?" I asked. "Carl Ferrari got 12 years federal prison, no possibility of parole for 8. The judge said his betrayal of personal and professional trust warranted the maximum sentence." She consulted her notes. "As for your ex-wife," I still winced slightly at that phrase. The annulment had been finalized within weeks of Sophia's arrest. But hearing about her still stung, not because I missed her, but because I was still processing how completely I'd been deceived. Sophia Li was sentenced to 15 years for racketeering, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The prosecution proved she'd been running criminal enterprises in 3 states under multiple identities. Your marriage was just her latest cover operation. The conspiracy to commit murder charge had been the most shocking revelation. FBI wiretaps from our honeymoon had captured her planning my death with Vincent, a hitman who had been on their watch list for years. When they arrested Vincent, he immediately cooperated, providing evidence of 2 other murders Sophia had ordered to cover her tracks. "She never loved me at all," I said quietly. "I was just a useful mark who provided money, social status, and legitimacy for her crimes." Isabella leaned forward. "Rowan, you saved your own life by uncovering her deception. If you hadn't started investigating, you'd probably be dead right now." That was the part that still kept me awake at night. My revenge plot had inadvertently become a survival strategy. "Have you heard anything about the other victims?" I asked. 17 people came forward after the story broke. She'd been running romance scams, identity theft, investment fraud schemes across the Pacific Northwest for over 5 years. The FBI estimates she stole over $3 million total. I nodded, processing the information. Sometimes I wondered who I might have become if I'd never discovered their betrayal, if I'd remained the trusting, naive person I used to be. "What about you?" Isabella asked. "Any plans to start dating again?" I laughed, but it wasn't entirely bitter. "I'm taking a break from romance for a while, focusing on rebuilding the company, going to therapy, learning to trust my instincts again." That's probably wise. After Isabella left, I walked to the window of my corner office. Looking out at Elliott Bay, the view reminded me of that night 6 months ago when I'd sat in Cary Park, devastated by what I'd discovered but not yet understanding. The full extent of the danger I was in, the revenge I'd planned, had been about betrayal and hurt feelings. The reality had been about survival and justice. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Eleanor Smith, my therapist. "Don't forget our session tomorrow at 3. We're making real progress on trust and healing." She was right. The anger that had consumed me for months was finally fading, replaced by something healthier. Wisdom, caution, a genuine appreciation for the people in my life who had proven themselves trustworthy. My mother had been incredibly supportive throughout the ordeal. My employees had stood by the company even during the worst of the scandal. Real friends, the ones who weren't Carl had, offered help without being asked. I'd learned to recognize the difference between people who cared about me and people who wanted something from me. As I prepared to leave the office, I reflected on the most important lesson from this entire experience. The best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or careful planning. The best revenge is simply living well, building something meaningful, and surrounding yourself with people who deserve your trust. Carl Ferrari was serving his sentence in federal prison, his reputation destroyed forever. Sophia Li was facing decades behind bars, her criminal empire dismantled, and me. I was free, successful, and finally able to sleep peacefully at night. 8. Knowing that justice had been served, and I had survived something that could have destroyed me. The honeymoon was over, but my real life was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.